I knew something was off the moment they quoted the policy number wrong. Denise Hall felt the carpeted floor of the HR office shift beneath her even before she stepped inside. The fluorescent lights reflected off the glass table, casting sharp lines across her calm, measured face. She nodded politely at the HR manager, a clipboard clutched in one hand, while the other finger twitched slightly, a subtle squeeze at the pen she held. Her breath was steady, almost imperceptibly shallow, as the HVAC hummed above, a low, constant drone against the silence of the office. The HR manager's words landed like stones. "Denise, we need to discuss a violation of Policy HR 4, 2.1. This is serious." Her eyes flicked to the document open on the tablet, the PDF page glowing pale blue. She scanned the text line by line, each number and clause familiar, each footnote like a small betrayal. Something didn't align. The version date, the footnotes, the way the procedure was described, it wasn't right. HR 4, 2.1. She knew that version had been retired months ago. Her fingers flexed around the pen, knuckles whitening just slightly, a micro gesture betraying the surge of shock she swallowed. Her lips pressed together. Her mind raced, silent, cataloging every discrepancy. The soft click of the pen against the tablet and the faint scratch of a pencil in the corner of the room amplified the tension. Denise's chest tightened. Hurt lanced through her, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, sharp pang that said, "They think I did something wrong. They don't see me." She stayed seated, posture perfect, eyes tracing the lines of text with cold precision. Silence became her armor. The HR manager looked at her, waiting for an answer. Denise only nodded, letting her gaze linger on the glowing policy numbers, absorbing the injustice without surrendering to it. And that's when it hit me, they weren't reading the right policy. Denise sat back at her desk, the soft hum of the HVAC filling the empty office like a steady heartbeat. Her laptop glowed pale blue, casting sharp rectangles of light across her face. She opened the HR PDF again, this time fully in her control, scrolling slowly, deliberately, each click a measured tap that echoed softly in the quiet space. She traced her finger along the lines of HR 4, 2.1, noting the version date, the 12th of January 2025. Something was wrong. That date didn't match the compliance portal she kept bookmarked, the one she had memorized more thoroughly than most HR personnel would ever care to. Denise's hand tightened slightly around the pen, just enough to leave a faint dent in the leather grip. Her lips pressed together. A tiny furrow appeared between her brows, a micro gesture signaling concentration and restrained frustration. The footnotes drew her attention next. Each reference, each approval signature or lack thereof, was a breadcrumb trail leading somewhere. She opened the internal version history, the cursor blinking patiently at her, and started layering document over document. HR's PDF cited an archived procedure, one retired months ago. The current operative version, version 4, effective the 3rd of February 2025, contained language entirely different from what they accused her of violating. Her chest rose slowly as she drew a quiet breath, the tension shifting from hurt toward a subtle, rising clarity. Denise's eyes flicked to the small timestamps on the compliance logs. Feb. 5/9/2 a.m. Submission received and fully approved. Everything aligned perfectly on her side. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, pausing as she cross-referenced an overlooked memo. HR 032, archived the 12th of January 2025. She exhaled softly, almost unconsciously, a tiny release of the weight pressing against her. Around her, the office remained oblivious. The faint click of a coworker's mouse, the occasional shuffle of papers, the low murmur of distant conversation. Denise noticed the sound cues as she had always done, the subtle indicators that everyone else was moving through routine, blind to the errors she was uncovering. She toggled between windows, noting small anomalies, 2 missing signature lines, 1 unapproved step in the workflow. Her lips pressed together again, but this time with a hint of satisfaction. Evidence was accumulating. Quietly, undeniably. She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing at the reflection in her monitor. The blue glow mirrored off her glasses, a moment of clarity crystallizing. Her pulse steadied, a rhythmic counterpoint to the injustice she had felt earlier. Denise could feel her calm, strategic mind settling into place, each realization sharpening like the edge of a blade. And then her eyes caught at a footnote she hadn't noticed before, tucked in the margin of HR's PDF, a small, almost hidden superseded Jan 12, 2025 marker. Her fingers flexed slightly at her sides, barely perceptible, but her breath hitched. Softly, almost to herself, she whispered, "They're not even using the right version." The cursor blinked at her. The room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning, but the weight of the discovery pressed against her like a tangible presence. Denise knew the path forward was clear, but the question remained. Why had they used the wrong document in the first place? Her hand hovered over the pen. She leaned forward, eyes scanning every line, every timestamp, every footnote again. Something deeper lurked in the HR trail, something that could unravel the accusation entirely. And that's when she realized there was more to uncover than she had imagined. Be honest. What would you do if it was you sitting in that room? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear you. I realized the version they were quoting didn't match the official policy. Denise's eyes narrowed at the glow of her laptop screen, the pale blue light reflecting off her glasses, casting a faint halo across her calm, focused expression. The office was quiet except for the gentle hum of the HVAC, the occasional click of a mouse, and the soft rustle of a PDF being navigated with precise taps on her trackpad. Each sound punctuated the stillness like markers on a map she was beginning to trace. Her fingers hovered for a moment, barely touching the trackpad, then moved deliberately, scrolling through the HR document once more. Version 3.1. Cited the 12th of January 2025, but the official policy portal showed version 4, effective the 3rd of February 2025. Denise's jaw tightened ever so slightly. Her lips pressed together. A shallow, controlled breath escaped as her mind cataloged the discrepancy. Not me. It's them. Her gaze flicked between timestamps, approval logs, and footnotes, each number and signature demanding attention like a puzzle, deliberately scattered across the digital canvas of her screen. February 5th, 9:02 a.m. submission, fully compliant. She leaned in closer, squinting slightly, the pale blue glow from the monitor reflecting in her glasses, casting faint prismatic streaks across her temples. 2 missing signatures in HR's document stood out like small, glaring errors, each one a silent accusation embedded in the file, accusing her without words. The PDF page turned under her finger with a subtle swipe, its faint rustle echoing in the quiet room, mingling with the low hum of the HVAC and the occasional distant click from a coworker's mouse. Denise's fingers flexed around the pen, knuckles pale, as though she could physically hold the timeline in place, pressing back against the injustice trying to anchor itself in her reality. Her eyes traced every line meticulously. Approval stamps, footnotes, timestamp after timestamp. They were not just data points. They were breadcrumbs, each one a testimony to what had really occurred versus the narrative HR had tried to force. A sudden thought pricked her consciousness. If they think they can hide behind outdated documents, they're gravely mistaken. She exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly, letting her calm center expand to contain the surge of focus building in her chest. The light in the office shifted imperceptibly as the sun inched past the tall glass windows, slicing across her desk in sharp, golden slashes that illuminated dust motes dancing lazily in the air. It reflected in her monitor, off the glass of her tablet, off the polished edge of the conference table she had commandeered as her workspace, a visual cue that something inside her was shifting too. Clarity. The pieces were aligning like the final strokes of a careful painting. She leaned forward slightly, eyes scanning each line of policy with renewed awareness, letting the quiet tension anchor her, letting the tiny anomalies breathe before she confronted them. Internal dialogue sharpened, crystal clear. This isn't a mistake I made. This is a system failing. HR is referencing something that no longer exists. They've built a narrative on outdated information, and I've been painted as the culprit. Her breathing remained steady, deliberate, each inhalation a measured rhythm. The faint hitch in her exhale betrayed the rising tension beneath her calm exterior, like a wire pulled taut under invisible pressure. Her hand hovered above the desk, fingertips brushing the smooth leather pad, ready to trace the next anomaly with precision. Denise began a methodical comparison, cross-referencing signatures across multiple documents, tracing footnotes back through layers of version history. Timestamp after timestamp confirmed what she had suspected from the first glance. HR's citation was flawed, obsolete, misapplied. Her pen tapped lightly against the desk, a rhythm she had cultivated to keep herself grounded in moments like this, a private metronome marking both patience and determination. Every click of the trackpad, every scroll of the PDF, became an act of quiet defiance. Every anomaly felt like a tiny victory. A missing approval here, a timestamp mismatch there, an archived memo that refused to align with HR's narrative, each one a whisper of truth in the static of assumed authority. Her eyes lingered on the data, each micro gesture a reflection of mounting strategic awareness, the tilt of her head as she noticed patterns, the subtle flicker of her pupils darting across multiple screens, the controlled inhale as she prepared the next logical move. And then, almost hidden in the corner of the version history, her gaze caught at a signature that shouldn't exist. Her pulse remained steady, but her awareness sharpened to a near-physical edge. It was faint, almost easily overlooked, yet perfectly out of place in the timeline, a small crack in HR's constructed facade. Denise paused, her chest rising and falling slowly, breath held just long enough to savor the moment of insight. The silent hum of the HVAC seemed to retreat, leaving only the faint clicking of her trackpad as she scrolled closer, examining each pixel, each line, each metadata point, until the truth was undeniable. Her mind raced, connecting dots, drawing invisible lines between disparate documents, patterns emerging where chaos had pretended to reign. Every micro detail, the slight skew of a date stamp, the absence of an approval signature, the misaligned version number formed a tapestry of deception she could now see in its entirety. Her knuckles whitened around the pen again, fingertips pressing lightly into the leather, grounding herself in the tactile reality while her mind mapped the immaterial threads of HR's mistake. She exhaled slowly, letting her pulse settle, her eyes lingering a moment longer on the anomaly, drinking in the quiet power of knowledge while the world around her remained oblivious. The office light shifted again, slicing across her monitor at a different angle, casting long shadows that mirrored the tension, gradually being transformed into understanding. Denise straightened, back firm, chin lifted slightly, her gaze sweeping across the screens one last time, committing the layout, the errors, the evidence to memory, and in that quiet, the controlled moment, she understood. The mistake was not hers. It never had been. The system had faltered, but she had found the truth, and with it, a weapon far more precise than anger or confrontation certainty. And then I sawed a signature that shouldn't exist, and suddenly, everything made sense. You won't believe what happens next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. I needed to see the whole sequence, every edit, every signature, before I could move. Denise settled into her chair, back straight, shoulders squared. The office lights softened as the afternoon sun shifted, casting long shadows across her desk. Her laptop glowed pale blue, reflecting faintly in her glasses, and her fingers hovered over the trackpad before clicking deliberately. Each movement was precise, intentional eyes scanning, fingers tapping lightly, micro-gestures telling a story of focus and quiet control. I opened the version history again, layer upon layer, each document stacked like a tower of evidence waiting to be scrutinized. Version 3.1, against 4, I traced every line, every entry, every tiny footnote with deliberate attention. Each timestamp was a heartbeat, every compliant signature a subtle declaration of truth. Each note in the footnotes, a breadcrumb connecting me to the reality HR hoped I wouldn't see. My pen tapped softly against the desk, a quiet metronome echoing through the otherwise still office, the sound merging with the soft hum of the HVAC, the distant shuffle of papers from a nearby room, and the occasional faint click of a coworker's mouse. The PDF pages rustled as I scrolled, the sound amplified in my mind, punctuating the tension building in the space around me. An email notification flickered briefly on the corner of my screen, vanishing before I could even click it, a vague subject line, no sender name. My head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing, a micro gesture of suspicion. I caught a shadow pass by the glass wall of my office, a colleague glancing briefly in my direction, then disappearing down the corridor. My lips pressed together, and I drew a controlled, almost imperceptible inhale, letting the calm anchor me while my mind catalogued every movement in the room. The pattern was unmistakable. Small, deliberate disturbances, subtle enough to avoid direct confrontation, yet enough to unsettle anyone unaware of the discrepancies I was uncovering. My gaze returned to the logs. Approval signatures scattered out of sequence. Compliance timestamps that didn't align with the version HR cited. Tiny anomalies almost imperceptible at first glance repeated across multiple files, as if someone had tried to create the illusion of order while masking the underlying misalignment. My fingers traced the lines on the screen, lightly tapping the trackpad as I paused to digest each irregularity. Lips tightened, jaw flexed subtly, micro-gestures betraying the calculated attention I was pouring into every detail. Patterns emerged gradually, each more damning than the last, delayed approvals always coinciding with HR's. Internal reviews, footnotes with repeated errors, citations pointing to documents that didn't exist in the current operative version. A signature appearing where logic dictated none should be. Each anomaly was a silent scream, a whisper of truth in the midst of constructed chaos. My heart rate remained steady, my breathing controlled, each inhalation deliberate, each exhalation measured. Calm, precise, strategic, I felt the quiet power of clarity in the face of misdirection. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting the light from the window slice across my desk in sharp golden slashes. The sun's movement cast long stripes across the documents, highlighting discrepancies that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. It was as if the light itself was assisting me, illuminating the cracks in the narrative HR had tried to build. I adjusted my posture, back straight, shoulders squared, pen still in hand, every movement intentional, every micro-gesture reinforcing my mental focus. I began connecting anomalies like constellations on a darkened sky. A delayed signature here, a mismatched timestamp there, a footnote that referenced a retired policy. But when combined, They revealed a pattern of deliberate oversight, small but consistent. Each observation was a thread, weaving a tapestry of mismanagement, perhaps even intentional obfuscation. My mind raced quietly, mapping connections, drawing lines between scattered pieces of evidence, calculating the consequences of each discovery. The office felt heavier, the silence, punctuated by the subtle cues of life around me, the soft whir of the air conditioning, the faint murmur of distant conversations, the rhythmic tapping of keys elsewhere. Each sound highlighted my isolation, my focus, my meticulous control over what I was seeing. Every anomaly I cataloged, every detail I verified, strengthened a quiet certainty. I was seeing the truth in a sea of misdirection. And then, a small, almost imperceptible anomaly caught my eye. A signature in a corner of the version history that shouldn't exist. My breath slowed. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, pausing as my mind registered the full implication. A micro gesture of satisfaction, a slight flex of the hand, a subtle tilt of the head, signaled the quiet triumph of knowledge over assumption. The anomalies weren't random, they were deliberate, and now I had traced them to their origin. I leaned forward, eyes scanning the timeline again, noting each minute irregularity. The light shifted across the desk once more, sharp golden lines cutting across documents and monitor glare alike, a visual mirror of my thought process. Each ray highlighted a detail I had almost missed, a date misaligned, a signature unaccounted for, a footnote pointing to an archived version. Clarity crystallized within me. I exhaled slowly, controlled, letting the tension settle while anticipation built for the next discovery. Everything was aligning. Every anomaly, every tiny inconsistency, every hidden irregularity was now part of a coherent narrative, one I could see, understand, and act upon. The chaos HR had tried to disguise now revealed itself in its full, undeniable form. I could feel the quiet power of knowledge pulsing through me, a steady, relentless force anchored in the meticulous observation of truth. The office hum persisted, clicks and keyboard taps distant, almost like punctuation. Denise scribbled notes in the margin of a printed compliance log, paper rustling softly. Awareness sharpened into strategy. Frustration hovered at the edge of her control, managed with deep, controlled breaths. She could see the outline of the pattern forming. Deliberate sabotage. Subtle enough to avoid immediate detection. Consistent enough to be suspicious, but not yet provable. She paused, eyes narrowing at the next line of the version history. The faint reflection of her monitor across the glass wall highlighted her focused expression. She leaned forward, hands lightly resting on the desk, letting the evidence speak to her without distraction. And just when I thought I had it all mapped, I noticed a new anomaly. One they didn't expect me to see. The original document was sitting there, untouched, waiting for me to find it. My eyes flickered across the monitor again, catching the soft blue glow that carved my features in sharp relief, highlighting every micro-expression, every subtle twitch of awareness. The office held its quiet vigil. The distant hum of the HVAC became a low, constant drum beneath my focus. The faint click of my trackpad echoed with deliberate rhythm, and the gentle rustle of paper as I adjusted the printed compliance log beside my keyboard sounded almost amplified in the stillness. I leaned in slightly, tilting my head, letting the light from the window slice diagonally across the desk, a perfect visual mirror of the clarity crystallizing in my mind. Each beam of sunlight seemed to illuminate not just the documents, but the logic threading through every line, every footnote, every signature. There it was, version 4, effective Feb. 3, 2025, the operative, official policy. My gaze drank in the metadata, confirming creation dates, last editor access, and the full audit trail. My fingers hovered for a heartbeat over the trackpad before scrolling deliberately, each movement precise, each line of text a revelation, every clause aligned flawlessly with my actions. Every footnote, each compliance signature, and every timestamp snapped together like pieces of a perfectly executed puzzle. I allowed myself a barely perceptible blink, a micro-gesture of quiet triumph, as if the world around me held its breath to witness the proof forming before my eyes. My pen tapped lightly against the desk, a subtle rhythm of calculated patience. My lips pressed together as I exhaled slowly, controlled, letting the coiled tension inside me unfurl just enough to savor the anticipation without ever giving it away. I returned my attention to the HR PDF. The contrast could not have been starker. HR 4.2.1. Outdated, clumsily cited, misaligned, footnotes missing, evidence half-finished at best. The discrepancies screamed silently across the screen, impossible to ignore. I cataloged them meticulously. Outdated citations, misplaced signatures, inconsistent logs, timestamps that defied logic. The pieces weren't merely pointing toward my innocence. They were shouting it, articulating it in the unyielding language of evidence. Each soft click of the trackpad marked another step in my methodical comparison between the versions. I leaned back slightly, letting my hands lightly grip the pen, feeling the weight of the moment settle in the quiet office. Shadows stretched across the room as the afternoon light waned, golden stripes emphasizing my focus, my calm dominance over the chaos HR had attempted to fabricate. I felt the pulse of the truth in the still air around me, subtle but insistent, a rhythm that resonated with the quiet power building within. Internal dialogue sharpened to a clear, unshakable certainty. Not only am I correct, I have the proof. They cannot argue this. I have been patient. I have been precise. And now, the alignment is complete. Every discrepancy, every anomaly, every overlooked detail converges into a coherent narrative that leaves no room for doubt. My cursor hovered over a particularly telling metadata entry, a log documenting every approval and access timestamp. I traced it with my finger, eyes narrowing as satisfaction curled quietly at the edges of my mind. All of it, every document, every edit, every interaction, documented, traceable, undeniable. The full tapestry of evidence was laid bare, and for the first time, I felt the weight of absolute clarity pressing around me, not threatening, but empowering. Like a silent wave of inevitability, I allowed my gaze to sweep over the rest of the desk, the office, the sunlight reflecting off the monitor and glass surfaces. Each reflection mirrored the precision of my thinking, the deliberate patience of my investigation. The faint rustle of papers, the occasional distant click, the slow hum of the HVAC all faded into background, a soft underscore to the singular certainty I now possessed. The truth was mine, meticulously uncovered, irrefutable and radiating power in every silent corner of the room. Denise allowed herself a slow inhale, a soft exhale, feeling the quiet satisfaction of mastery over a chaos she hadn't created, but now commanded. The anticipation built she had the truth, but the confrontation, the exposure, had yet to come. Each moment stretched, the office hum and clicking keys serving as a subtle underscore to her preparation. And just like that, the truth had a witness. But would they see it before it was too late? If you've ever been overlooked or underpaid, this part's for you. And if you feel that, hit that. They came back into the room, expecting hesitation, but I was already steps ahead. Denise sat at her desk, hands lightly clasped over her pen, posture impeccable, her back straight. shoulders relaxed but taut with controlled readiness. The office was still, the fluorescent lights above casting a sterile glow over the pale carpet. Sunlight angled in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, brushing across her laptop screen in a slanted streak, highlighting the glow of her carefully organized documents. She didn't need to speak. Her quiet, unwavering presence was enough to set the tone. The HR lead stepped into the office, shoes clicking softly against the floor. Their eyes darted toward Denise, then to the scattered printouts, then back to her. The shadow of tension fell across their face, long and distorted in the late afternoon light. Denise's eyes tracked them with subtle precision micro-gestures, revealing everything. The quick glance down at their hands, the fleeting tightening of their jaw, the shallow inhale that betrayed their unease. She stayed still, composed, allowing the room to register her calm dominance. A soft click punctuated the silence as the door opened again. The policy team arrived, carrying laptops and folders marked with compliance logs. Denise watched as they carefully spread the documents across the glass table, their fingers lightly brushing the pages, confirming details. Every click, every shuffle of paper, every faint mechanical hum from the laptop seemed amplified in the quiet office, like a symphony underscoring the tension. Denise leaned back slightly in her chair, the sun streak across her face, acting almost as a spotlight, clarity and purpose shining through. She opened version 4 once more, meticulously aligned to her own records. Every timestamp, every approval signature, every footnote verified her adherence to policy. The HR 4 2.1 citation, outdated and misapplied, stood in stark contrast, glaring in its irrelevance. My lips pressed together, and I let out a faint, controlled exhale, almost imperceptible, as my mind cataloged the subtle, cascading reactions in the room. The HR lead shifted, initially a slight adjustment of weight in their chair, almost invisible, but then more noticeably, a subtle tightening of their shoulders, the flicker of unease crossing their eyes. Fingers tapped against the polished desk, hesitant and uneven at first, then retreated as if unsure of their own rhythm. Their gaze darted repeatedly, almost nervously, between the policy team and me, tracing the documents with suspicion and growing doubt. A small bead of sweat caught the light on their temple, glistening faintly, a quiet confession of their inner disarray. Even without words, I could feel the shift in the room, the fragile narrative HR had tried to construct, beginning to crumble beneath the weight of my quiet, unwavering presence. The policy team spoke softly, each word deliberate, measured, precise, as though the air itself demanded careful handling. They referenced the version history, metadata logs, compliance approvals, and timestamps, every point I had meticulously cataloged, and each reference landed like a subtle, undeniable strike. I watched the HR lead's expression change minutely at first, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a brief tension across the jaw, a momentary tilt of the head. But as the minutes unfolded, the tension coiled and uncoiled like a tightly wound spring, their carefully rehearsed posture faltering, the confident mask of authority cracking ever so slightly with each confirmed fact. My own micro-gestures mirrored my strategic calm, a subtle lift of the chin, the smallest controlled blink, a gentle rhythmic tap of my pen against the desk. Each motion exuded precision, patience, and intelligence, silent weapons far more effective than confrontation. Outside the glass walls, colleagues paused mid-step in the hallway, sensing the electric charge of the atmosphere. The office hum, usually a mundane background, now amplified every sound. Keyboards clicking, chairs shifting, paper rustling, soft footsteps on carpet, all adding to the mounting tension. I absorbed it all, each micro-detail feeding into my awareness, yet my breathing remained steady, deep, controlled. The subtle shadow of the HR lead stretched across the floor, contrasting against my illuminated face, underscoring the psychological tilt of power. It was not just that I had the evidence, it was that I now commanded the room without a single raised voice. Minutes stretched, elongating into an almost cinematic slow motion, as the policy team methodically walked HR through every discrepancy, every timestamp, every compliance signature. I remained unwavering, my gaze steady, never flinching, never gesturing dramatically, never demanding attention. My quiet confidence did the work for me. I noticed the smallest fidget, a finger drumming nervously, a brief muttered under the breath comment, a glance toward me seeking confirmation, then away again. Acknowledgement dawning as the foundation of their accusation collapsed beneath the irrefutable weight of evidence. I allowed myself another measured exhale, soft, deliberate, savoring the moment of silent triumph that pulsed through the room. No applause was necessary. No acknowledgement was required. Their reactions, the tiny micro-expressions of dawning understanding and reluctant acceptance, were sufficient. My calm, strategic presence dominated the space, reshaping perception, asserting authority, and reclaiming control, all without raising my voice, without demanding recognition. The room bent to the truth quietly, and I let it. The sunlight slanted lower through the tall windows, casting elongated stripes across the polished desk, reflecting faintly off the glass surfaces and metallic edges of the pens and laptops. It felt like the light itself was endorsing the clarity I now possessed. Every gesture, every micro-movement, every subtle pause reinforced the reality. I had been precise. I had been patient. And the room, once set against me by assumption and outdated citations, was now aligned with the undeniable proof I had unearthed. Yet, as the policy team affirmed the evidence, Denise noticed the lingering uncertainty in the HR lead's eyes, a flicker of doubt that signaled unfinished business. She knew this was not the end. The validation confirmed her adherence to policy, yes, but there was still a final, decisive step that they hadn't anticipated, one that would secure not just vindication, but control of the narrative. The sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the office, reflecting the unspoken tension and anticipation. Denise's reflection in the monitor shimmered faintly, the light catching the edge of her glasses, a visual metaphor for her clarity piercing the ambiguity of the situation. She flexed her fingers slightly around the pen, feeling the weight of preparedness, the calm assurance that every move she had made was deliberate, every detail accounted for. And as they admitted the truth, I knew one final step remained, one they didn't see coming. I finally held the proof in my hands, and with it, my future. Denise sat at her desk, a folder of official confirmations resting in front of her. The late afternoon sun spilled across the polished surface, golden light reflecting faintly off her laptop and the edges of the papers. Each document policy validation, compliance logs, email acknowledgments, was a testament to her diligence, her precision, her patience. She traced the top page with a finger, a micro-gesture of quiet reverence. Her badge rested on the desk beside her. She picked it up lightly, fingers curling around the smooth metal, and inhaled deeply, letting the calm warmth of accomplishment settle in her chest. Outside the glass window, the office continued its rhythm. Faint keyboard clicks, distant murmurs, the soft shuffle of footsteps. But within her space, time seemed to slow. Every sound became a punctuation mark in her moment of triumph. Allowed myself a subtle smile, a quiet curve of satisfaction that never reached boastfulness, just serene acknowledgement of the long, precise work that had brought me here. The HR team had formally withdrawn the erroneous disciplinary action, each document stamped and signed, processed with the deliberate care I had demanded without ever speaking a word. Compensation was initiated and confirmed, flowing into my account like the quiet justice it represented. My role was reaffirmed. Recognition circulated quietly among senior leadership, murmured in emails and nods, never loud but unmistakable. Colleagues stopped by my desk, brief visits, soft smiles, whispered congratulations, subtle gestures of acknowledgement. I returned each with controlled grace, a tilt of the chin, a slight lift of the eyebrows, a knowing glance that conveyed understanding without a single word. I leaned back slowly in my chair, letting the tension in my shoulders dissolve as my eyes drifted toward the tall windows where sunlight poured in, scattering across the polished floor in dancing streaks of gold. Shadows stretched and shifted, a visual mirror of clarity overcoming the months of confusion and quiet frustration. My fingers tapped lightly against the edge of the folder, tracing the embossed lettering, the corner of each page, as I reviewed every detail one last time. Each timestamp aligned perfectly, every footnote confirmed beyond dispute, each log and approval signature matching the internal records I had meticulously maintained. The injustice that had struck so sharply weeks ago now lay dismantled, replaced by irrefutable truth, restored dignity, and the quiet satisfaction of patient precision. My mind ran through the sequence again, in slow, deliberate flashes. The misquoted policy, the outdated HR PDF, the signatures that didn't exist, the version history meticulously cross-referenced. I had cataloged it all, step by step, every anomaly recorded and accounted for, each discrepancy proving beyond argument that the narrative HR had built was fundamentally flawed. Internal dialogue flowed like a steady undercurrent, quiet yet resolute. I knew the rules. I knew the system. I stayed patient. I stayed precise. And now, nothing can erase that. I drew a deep, measured breath, chest rising and falling in deliberate rhythm, letting the quiet triumph settle in with every inhale and exhale. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a display. It was a celebration of resilience, the satisfaction of control regained, of fairness restored. I gathered the documents carefully, each motion precise, deliberate, almost ceremonial, each paper placed into my bag with a measured motion, edges aligned, the weight of proof resting heavily yet comfortably in my hands. I stood slowly, adjusting my posture, feeling the familiar click of my badge clipped firmly against my lapel. Shoulders squared, spine straight. I scanned the office with quiet authority, every movement controlled, every gaze deliberate. The sunlight caught my face just so, illuminating the subtle contours, the faint line of my jaw, the calm in my eyes. Across the glass of the building opposite, my reflection stared back, an image of focus, of unshakable certainty, of visual reinforcement of empowerment. I took a few steps toward the door, each footfall measured, echoing softly against the tile floor, the office sounds clicking keyboards, distant footsteps. The low hum of the HVAC were no longer background noise, but markers of the normalcy I had restored. Every glance from passing colleagues carried silent recognition. Every subtle shift in the HR team's posture was another acknowledgement of the order I had reinstated. I let my eyes linger briefly on the polished surface of the desk, on the neatly stacked documents, on the faint reflection of sunlight glinting off the folder edges. Each visual cue reinforced the truth. Diligence, patience, and calm precision had prevailed, where assumption and error once dominated. I finally exhaled fully, a long, slow release that carried with it weeks of tension, uncertainty, and the quiet weight of vindication. There was no fanfare, no applause, no dramatic gesture, just the serene, unmistakable knowledge that I had navigated a system built on error and assumption, had emerged intact, empowered, and completely in command of my professional reality. Knowledge, preparation, and integrity had been my weapons, and now they stood immortalized in every timestamp, every signature, every confirmation I held before me. I paused for a long moment by the window, letting the sunlight warm my face, shadows dancing lightly across the floor in perfect symmetry with my thoughts. A final micro-gesture, a subtle tilt of the head, a brief, controlled smile sealed the moment. I had been tested. I had endured. I had emerged, not just unscathed, but victorious. And in the quiet clarity of that afternoon, I understood fully. This was more than vindication. This was empowerment. Every step I took back to my workspace felt profoundly symbolic, each movement a quiet reclamation of the space that had always been mine, now finally recognized as such. My authority, once questioned, now radiated subtly in the way heads lifted in passing acknowledgement, in the brief, involuntary glances of colleagues. The click of my heels against the tile echoed softly, punctuated by the rustle of paper shifting in my bag, the faint hum of the HVAC threading through the silence like a gentle drumbeat marking regained control. Even the weight of my bag seemed lighter, every movement deliberate, measured, conscious, an unspoken choreography of confidence and command. I paused at my desk, letting the sunlight spill across the surface of polished wood, reflecting off the corners of neatly stacked documents. My eyes lingered on the folder one last time, fingers brushing lightly over the edges, as if feeling the gravity of the victory encoded in every sheet. I tilted my head slightly, inhaled deeply, and exhaled with the faintest, almost imperceptible sigh, a micro-nod of pride that captured the culmination of weeks of patience, precision, and strategic endurance. A barely there smile curved my lips, quiet but profound, telling the story that no words could, embodying triumph earned, not with noise or theatrics, but with unwavering integrity and intelligence. I sank slowly into my chair, fingers resting lightly on the keyboard, allowing the rhythm of my heartbeat to sync with the low hum of the office. I opened a blank document, deliberately leaving the first line empty for a moment, savoring the weight of possibility. Then I began a memo, not retaliation, not accusation, but guidance. Each word chosen to illuminate, clarify, and subtly influence the culture around me. I wrote to ensure mistakes would be harder to repeat, to provide a quiet blueprint for fairness and accountability. Knowledge, preparation, and strategic calm had become my tools, wielded openly now, but with the restraint and grace that made them formidable. Sunlight glinted off my badge as I leaned back slightly, eyes tracing the slanted shafts of light that crossed my desk, illuminating dust motes in slow, golden arcs. My reflection in the monitor mirrored a quiet, invincible strength. Every line of my posture, every micro-gesture, every deliberate pause spoke of resilience, mastery, and calm authority. The challenges I had faced, each careful move made in silence, every painstakingly reviewed note and cross-checked timestamp, they had all culminated here, in dignity restored, in empowerment solidified, in control reclaimed. I allowed myself a slow, deep inhale, letting the calm settle fully in my chest. My eyes drifted around the office one last time, noting the soft shuffle of papers, the quiet hum of distant keyboards, the subtle movements of colleagues resuming their routines, all underscoring the invisible rhythm I now conducted. No one spoke, yet everything felt aligned. I exhaled again, a controlled release, the air carrying the quiet weight of triumph. Knowledge is the quietest weapon, I whispered to myself, letting the words anchor the moment. Preparation is the most undeniable power, and no one can ever take that away. Each syllable resonated in the silence, a mantra of hard-won clarity and authority. I pressed the keys lightly, fingers poised with deliberate intention, and began to type, not to fight, not to prove, but to illuminate. The memo became my echo in the system, a subtle ripple of influence that would ensure fairness, transparency, and respect for those who came after me. Time seemed to stretch. As I worked, sunlight shifting across my desk, shadows lengthening in tandem with the calm certainty I felt. Every micro gesture, every tap of my pen against the desk, every measured breath became part of the rhythm of quiet victory. I sat there, fully present, each movement deliberate, each thought aligned with the truth I had uncovered and the order I had restored. In that moment, the office wasn't just a workplace. It was a testament to patience, precision, and the invisible power of strategic integrity. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us who we are. For every Black woman told to stay quiet, speak anyway.